guys, it's Courtney. Today I am going to be creating a scene using the November 2019 kit, the My Monthly Hero kit, which it is jam-packed full of goodies, and I had to have this. This is perfect for any scene builder. So I'm taking a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock here, and I have all of my masks cut. And I'm just kind of arranging my masks out to kind of get an idea of how I wanted my placement. I cut way more masks than I actually need, but this way I can kind of see what it's going to look like just by arranging those masks. And if I don't use them for this card, I'll just use them for another card. So I'm going to bring out my Misty just for this part here. There's like ribbon that you can put on the banister of the stairs. So I'm arranging my mask for the stairs, then placing that ribbon right over the stamp, right over the mask. So I have perfect placement. I'm going to go ahead and stamp that out with Blackout ink by Ink on 3 because it is a Copic safe ink. And then I'm going to go ahead and mask that out. And I am using Simon Says stamp masking paper. This is my preferred masking paper. It's nice and tacky, but not too tacky where it's going to tear your paper when you remove it. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up. Now this one's a little intricate, so you kind of have to go a little bit at a time to make sure it's lined up perfectly. But once that is lined up, I'm going to bring out the stamp for the staircase. And that way I can line that directly over my masked image and again stamp that out with that Blackout ink. Now for the mask for this one, originally I did not cut between the little oh boy, things, the spaces in between. I didn't cut those out, but then I realized I was probably going to need to cut some of them. So I'm going to cut directly through my mask just to cut out those little individual areas. And I just cut out one to start, and then I'm going to arrange my masks back onto my card panel to see if I need to cut any more. That way I'm not doing any unnecessary cutting because it's not hard, but it's kind of a little time consuming. So I was going to use this clock originally. That was my plan. But once I got everything put together the second time, I really wasn't liking the placement. It was going to hide the Christmas tree if I put that behind the stairs, or it was going to hide some of the clock if I put that behind the stairs. So I decided to forget the clock for this one, and I'm just going to be using the tree. I did have to cut one more little space in between for this mask, and then I can just line that up. Again, just go a little bit at a time, especially when you've kind of cut pieces out of your mask. You just want to make sure that all of the little areas are lined up nicely. Going to use the mask for this chair as a guide so that I can stamp this little dog on this rug, mask him out, and then I will go ahead and stamp the chair so the chair looks like it's behind the dog. So while I'm completing my stamping and masking here, I do want to announce another giveaway. The other day, I did announce a $25 gift card to Arteza, and that winner will be announced in the community section today, November 15th. This time today, I am going to be giving away a $25 gift card to Hero Arts because I love this kit, and I hope you guys can get your hands on this kit because there is so much you can do with it. You can make all of your Christmas cards with this kit. So worth it. So today is November 15th. All you have to do to enter it is just leave a comment. I don't care what your comment is. Well, I do care because I love to read my comments. But just so that I know you want to be entered in the giveaway, leave a comment and I will be picking a winner this Monday. So it will be the 18th. And again, that will be announced in the community section. So if you are not subscribed to my channel, make sure that you're subscribed so that you get the notification of the winners. And this is nationwide. You do not have to be a U.S. resident in order to win. Anybody can win this giveaway. So $25 to Hero Arts. Just leave a comment and the winner will be chosen on Monday, November 18th. All right, so let's get back to the card. So once my images were all masked out, I'm going to go ahead and take my T-square ruler and a Copic Safe pen. I'm using an EK Success journaling pen, and I'm just going to draw 2 straight lines. And this is basically where your floor is going to meet your wall. And the other line is just going to be basically create the moldings or the baseboard. And we'll color that last because I wasn't sure how I wanted to color that. But once that was drawn out, I'm going to use that as a guide, and I'm going to mask out the bottom portion of my card panel. This is going to be, I'm masking out the floor because I'm going to be coloring that with Copic markers, but my wall is going to be ink blending with some Distress Oxides. So I'm going to mask that out with a few pieces or 2 pieces of Post-it note tape. And you could use regular masking paper here. It doesn't really matter. But I use 2 pieces just so that my ink blending brush doesn't go beyond that mask, because I've had that happen one too many times. So I'm using a Blending Buddy brush by Trinity Stamps, and I'm using 2 different colors here as my base of my wall, I guess you could say. I'm using Bundled Sage and Shabby Shutters. Couldn't think of it. So I'm starting out with the Bundled Sage, and I'm just adding a very light layer. You can see that each time I ink up my brush, I'm tapping off onto my scrap piece of paper because I don't want a ton of ink yet. I'm going to be adding more ink on top of this, so I don't want to oversaturate the paper. The Distress Oxides tend to sit on top of the paper rather than soak into it right away. So if you add too much ink, you're not going to... You can only add so much ink. Let me put it that way. So once you add too much ink, you're really not going to get a good blend. So I'm going to bring out that Shabby Shutters, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that to right along where that Post-it note tape is, because this would be the darkest. This would be the part that's coming up from the floor. So this would be a little bit darker, and then I'm just going to blend that out a little bit further. Once that's done, I am going to go ahead and add some, I guess you could say, pattern to the background. I want it to make it look like it's that old-fashioned wallpaper, because this kind of gives me a vintage look. These stamps remind me of kind of like a vintage look and kind of like an older Victorian home or something like that. So I wanted to add some stripes, but subtle stripes. So I'm using the Classy Stripe Stencil by Altenew. I use some Pixie spray on the back of it so it doesn't move. And then I'm going to bring out some peeled paint Distress Oxides. And again, I'm going to start on that mask, on that Post-it note tape, and I'm kind of just swooping that up. I want it to be subtle. I don't want it to be too overwhelming. It's just the background. But I do want to add, have a little something rather than just having it be a solid color. Now, also remember that I didn't cut out those little spaces on my mask for my staircase, but we're going to try to take some Copic markers and color those areas in so that it matches the wall. So once all of my ink blending was done, I can go ahead and remove my masks. Keep in mind that they may be a little damp because of the Distress Oxides, depending on how much you used. I didn't really use a lot, so I don't have a problem removing my masks right away. But if you do really saturate the paper, you may want to give it just a couple of minutes before removing those masks. So I got out my Copic chart to try to match up the best I can any color that will match the wallpaper in the background. And I'll be honest with you, I don't have any. I don't have all of the Copic markers. I probably only have maybe half-ish. And so I had a little bit of a problem trying to match this up perfectly. But the good thing about it is Copic markers or any other alcohol markers are transparent. So you can kind of layer them on top of one another until you get the look that you're looking for. So I started with this G20 and it was just a little bit too light. So you'll see that I'm going to add a few different colors here. I'm doing a little blending here and there until I get the color to match the best I possibly can. Is it perfect? No, but once everything is complete, I don't think the recipient or anybody that's quickly looking at the card is really going to be able to tell the difference. So once that was done, we are going to go ahead and color in the floor. And The blend doesn't have to be perfect for this either, and you'll see why in just a minute. So I'm going to use some warm gray markers, and I'm going to go in right with my darkest color first. The darkest area of the floor is going to be the part of the floor that's furthest away from us, the part of the floor that meets the wall. So I'm going to go in with my W7 and add a little bit of shading to the back portion of the floor. Blend that out with the W5 and W3, and then finish off with the W1. I am also creating a shadow underneath each one of those presents, starting with that darkest color and just blending that out each time. Again, your blend doesn't need to be perfect, just as long as you have a variation in color to give your card and give your little scene some depth. Now, when you're filling in a large area like I am here, especially when I get to that W1, you may have to go over the area more than once because you tend to get streaky lines with alcohol markers, and that's totally normal. You may just need to saturate the paper a little bit more, and a good tip is to make sure that you're going in the same direction each and every time, and also kind of flip around your marker. Even though the marker may not be dry, when you're coloring a large area, the tip or the nib might get a little dry. So just flip it to the other side and you should be good to go. So once the floor was all colored in, I am going to take a paper towel and some regular rubbing alcohol. You can definitely use the colorless blender solution for this as well. And I'm just going to kind of roll this and bunch this up and just dab this all over the floor. Now you want to make sure that you're not getting too close to the wall because any moisture is going to react with that Distress Oxide ink. So I'm just staying right on the floor, and it's hard to tell on camera, but this gives it a little bit of texture, almost like a carpet. Now this will be wet. If it's cold, if your card panel is cold, it's still wet. So let it sit for a few minutes before you actually move on to the coloring of the images. So once that was dry, I'm going to go ahead and start off with this little cat. I want this to appear as a white cat. So I'm going to just add my shading. So any white object still has shading to it. I'm starting off with the C5, and you can see that I'm using that very sparingly. I'm only adding that to the very darkest areas, which is basically where his little hind leg is bent a little bit and where there would be a shadow where one part of his body is hanging over the other. I'm going to blend that out with the C3, C1, and then finish off with the C00, which, to be honest, is basically a colorless blender. So you can use a colorless blender for that too. I added just a teeny tiny bit of pink in the inside of his ears as well, or her ears. So next we're going to move on to the dog, and I'm going to bring out some E30 markers, and I'm basically doing the shading for him very similar to the way I did with the cat. So the shading for his little hind leg there would also cast a shadow. There's a little curvy line there anyway. I just tend to extend that up a little bit each and every time, and that will really give you some dimension. I'm also adding some shadows behind or next to his ears and where his tail is kind of curled up as well. I did go in right with the darkest color here because there's not really a whole lot of area to work with, especially when you're kind of breaking it down to the ears, the body, the face. So I had no problem going right in with the darkest color for this. So next we're going to move on to at least portion of the stairs. We're going to move on to the stair part itself instead of the runner. The runner is going to be red. I'm saving my reds till last, which I definitely recommend you guys doing if you're going to add red to any scene. So there's basically two parts of these steps. There's the vertical and the horizontal. So I'm starting with the vertical part, or vertical as if you're looking at a set of stairs. So this part would be a little bit darker. So I'm using my E59 and E57 and E55. I started right in with the darkest color, and that's going to be towards the top where the actual horizontal part of the stairs is kind of hanging over it just a little bit. And I only really use the E55 on the first couple of steps because the further back they get, the smaller they get and the darker they get. For the horizontal portion of the stairs, or the part of the stairs that we'd actually step on, is going to be a little bit lighter. So my darkest color here is the E57. I'm going to blend that out with the E55 and finish off with the E53. And again, not bringing up the E53 all the way. I mean, you can, but there's really not a whole lot of room to work with. For the banister we're going to basically do the same thing. We're going to use the same color combination. The main part here, basically all of these parts are round. So I want to make sure that I keep a very strong highlight. So I'm going in with the E59 and I'm just going to go around either edge. And you can see that I'm just using the very tip of my marker. My marker's pretty much straight up and down. I do get asked a lot how I get into those little teeny tiny areas with my Copic markers. And it just takes practice. You want to make sure that you're holding that marker straight up and down and barely touching the paper. As soon as that tip of the marker touches the paper, your ink will spread. It may not be visible to the eye unless you're coloring something super tiny, but it does spread just like any alcohol ink will. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes if I'm barely touching the paper, I completely miss the paper because I'm going in with such a light hand. So it just takes practice. So I'm going to go ahead and extend some of these areas out with the E57, but I'm keeping those little skinny areas. I skipped the E57. I'm just going to use the E55. That way I have a scary dark and a scary light, and that's what's going to give me the contrast. I really don't have any room to add more than just 2 colors here. So as I was going in with the E55, I realized I totally missed one with the E59, so I did have to go back and add a little bit of shading there. So next we're going to move on to the chair, and I want this chair to be kind of like a golden yellow. I'm going to start off with my lightest color this time to get my darkest areas mapped out. So there's like little buttons, I guess, on the back part of this chair, and that's going to kind of be indented in. So there would be a little bit of shading around there. So when I go in with my darkest color, which is an E99, I'm going to add my shadows where I've already placed them down, but I'm also going to go along with the lines of the illustration, those, I guess, the little crosses, like I'm just going to go over that with my darkest color, but I'm not going to blend this out each and every time. I'm just going to leave it with my darkest color. Once I get to my lightest color, it's going to blend out a little bit anyway, but that would actually be the very darkest area of that part of the chair anyway. I also added a little bit of shadow behind the cat, where the cat would be casting a shadow on the back of the chair as well. Going to go ahead and blend this out with the Y26. You notice that I skipped from an E marker to a Y marker. Yellows are kind of tough sometimes, especially if you're looking for a golden yellow. They're either really bright yellow or kind of like an orangey yellow, and I definitely didn't want an orangey yellow. So if you're looking for a golden yellow, try bringing in an E marker. Don't go too dark. An E99 is good. An E37 or E35 is also good for this. And then kind of tone that down a little bit with your yellows, and you'll notice a big difference. So once the chair was done, I want to use the same color combination for the presents, or some of the presents anyway. So for this first one, I am just going to be coloring in the ribbon, and I'm just going to add a little bit of shading to the top and bottom, and also where it's tied in a bow, where it's actually tied, that's going to be the darkest because that's where the ribbon is actually bunched up. So you can see that I don't necessarily use all of my colors here if I can't fit them. Just as long as you have a scary light and a scary dark and a mid-tone, you're fine. You'll still get the contrast you're looking for. You don't have to fill in 4 colors for every area. I'm also coloring one of the presents themselves with the same color combination. I did add a little bit of a shadow where the corner of the box would be, but otherwise colored it pretty much the same way. Next, we're going to move on to the Christmas tree, and I'm going to bring in a few different greens here, and I'm going to go right in with my darkest color. Now you can see in the illustration or in the stamped image, there's a lot of little squiggly lines. I'm kind of using those as my shadows. So if you look at a Christmas tree, there's a lot of indentations and a lot of different variation of green. It's not just one solid green. So that's why I'm using various colors, but I'm not necessarily creating shadows or shape. Well, I guess I'm creating shape, but not necessarily shadows. You just want a variation in color. And it honestly doesn't matter where you put them. You can put them anywhere. You can see that I use that darkest color in some areas, but I'm adding even more shadow with my darkest mid-tone. So not every shadow or every dark area needs to be the darkest area. You can certainly add more shadows with your mid-tone colors if you don't if you want to get a different variation of depth. So I'm going to extend these areas out a little bit further with this lightest mid-tone now, and then I'm going to finally go in with that lightest green. I'm pretty much just filling everything in. I am kind of sort of going around the ornaments, but I'm not too concerned if I go over them, especially with the lightest green. We're going to be using a pretty dark red combination, and that's going to pretty much cover anything that we happen to color over. So once the tree was done, I'm going to move on to a different green combination for this little rug that the dog is laying on, as well as the blanket that is laying over the arm of the chair. I don't want this to blend in with my tree. Obviously, the tree needs to be a different green, and my wall is green. So I definitely need to mix up my greens a little bit. So I'm going to bring in some YG90 markers, and you'll see that I'm skipping the YG93. Couple of reasons for this. The main reason is that I'm out of ink and I don't have a refill. Second is that this is a natural blending family. And a lot of times when you use a natural blending family, you'll get a great blend, but you don't necessarily get the contrast. So skipping the YG93 and going from the YG95 to the 91 will actually give me a stronger highlight, and it will give me the contrast that I'm looking for. So for the blanket, I just paid attention to the little fold lines that are within the image, and that's pretty much the only place that I put those shadows, so it looks like the blanket has some folds in it. I am also going to color one of these presents with this same green combination. Again, this is the reason why you need to kind of switch up the greens a little bit so that this doesn't blend in too much with the Christmas tree behind it. So once that's done, I am ready to bring out my reds. I wait to bring out my reds because reds tend to bleed, and once they do, you can't really get them up other than a gel pen, and in this case, a gel pen's just not going to work. So I'm going to start with the runner on the stairs, and I'm going to pretty much do this the same way as I did the stairs themselves, the vertical and the horizontal areas, and adding just a little bit more shading on those vertical areas. In fact, I'm skipping the highlight color for those areas altogether. My highlight for those areas will be the R24, where the highlight for the actual step portion of the stairs is going to be an R22. Now, I always talk about the scary dark color. The scary dark color is what gives us a huge amount of contrast that we want to see in our coloring. But you also have to be careful when you're going in with reds, like I said, because that scary dark is not the only scary red there is. They're all scary. I've had many times where I've oversaturated my paper and my colors bled, and you try to take a colorless blender and you kind of just smear it around. Or if you color your reds first and you happen to touch just the tip of a marker, a different marker to that red area, you're going to drag that red throughout your entire card. So this is another reason why I wait to do the reds till last. So once the stairs were done, or this runner was done, that bottom step just was looking a little bit too light for me. So I ended up going back in with the R46 and just added a little bit more of that, and I liked that much better. Now for the ribbon that's hanging over this banister here, I am going to add, again, the shadows are going to be where the ribbon is bunched up. So the actual bow where it's bunched up, that's going to be the darkest. And then the ribbon that goes between the two bows, I'm just going to draw one flick line on either side. And this is going to give you some shape to it. You don't necessarily have to do this with all of your 4 reds that you're using, just as long as you do this with probably the 2 darkest. Once everything is complete and you add that highlight color, you'll notice that this does give a lot of texture to it. But again, using the same color combination, I'm using the same red combination for all of the red areas. So once my ribbons and my bows were done, I'm going to move on to the ornaments on the tree. And again, I colored directly over some of these with that light green, but I'm going to go right in with my darkest color, and I'm just going to basically make a C. And it doesn't matter what side that you put it on. whatever side you want. So I'm creating a C on the left-hand side of these with my darkest color. Then I'm going to use the same reds as I used before, and I'm just going to make these little C's a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker, so that I have a very teeny tiny highlight off to the right-hand side for that R22. Again, you don't want to oversaturate your paper. Once that red moves, there's no moving it back. So the last bit of coloring that I'm going to show you is this little pillow. And all I really did here was with the scary dark color, I added 2 little indentations on the top part of the pillow. And then I'll add that shadow behind the cat with my 2 midtones and extend those little indentations out a little bit further. I did color the rest of the ribbons and the presents with this same red combination and did my shading the same way as I did before. So, well, actually, there is more coloring. I lied. For this baseboard here, I wanted this to look like wood grain, and I grabbed my E59 marker and realized I can't do that. That's going to blend in with my staircase. So I ended up bringing in the E33 and the E31. That way it's a lot lighter, and it's kind of just falls to the background, and it's not going to be a main focus, and it's not going to blend in with my staircase. For the little tags on the presents, I just left these white. I did add a little bit of shading with my C3, C1, and the C00 just to add a little bit of contrast. So once all of my coloring was complete, I am going to go ahead and add a little flick on the darkest area of these ornaments with a white gel pen, and these are really going to make these appear to be shiny. Going to take a Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen and add a whole lot of shimmer to that star on the top. I also added a little bit of shimmer to the bows and the ribbon as well as the pillow. And then I will finish off the card with a sentiment using VersaFine Onyx Black ink in the top left-hand corner. And that is it. That is the card for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and have a great day. Bye.